So hi everybody, so let's start. Okay, so shall we start? Okay, so basically this is the outline of my topic. I'm going to talk about fallacies in real operation, in everyday talk, mostly in media discourse, mediated political discourse. So we are going to revisit the type of arguments actually that were put forward by Bush and his administration before they invade Iraq. And I'm going to see how these arguments are fallacious. What type of fallacy is there in those type of pro-war arguments? So I'm going to talk mostly about strawman fallacy, argumentum ad baculum, the fallacy of the stick, argumentum ad hominem, that's in its direct and circumstantial versions, and analogical reasoning, and some sort of consequentialist argumentation, slippery slope, and the sunk cost. And at the end, maybe emotional appeal as some sort of illegitimate argumentation, maneuvering strategy. And if time permits, I might go to metaphor as rhetoric. That's just in case I have enough time. But my aim is just to go about fallacies in general, not metaphor. Okay, so let's start. One of the theoretical assumptions that actually underlines my research is based on the assumption that language is inherently dialogic, because I'm actually researching newspaper opinion editorials. So some of you might say, but there is no dialogue in newspapers. So what I am stating here is that in every type of textual discourse, there is always a hypothetical opponent or a hypothetical co-arguer. My research questions are about what type of arguments and argumentation schemes are deployed by the pro-war arguers, and in what way are these argumentation schemes or arguments fallacious. This is the basis of my data. It was actually my PhD some 4 years ago. So I used New York Times, Washington Post, Times, Guardian, Al-Ahram from Egypt, Le Monde, Le Figaro from France. And my selection was based on the position of these newspapers and their editorials as regards the invasion of Iraq. And the period was actually the prelude. It's from the 1st February to the 20th of March, 2003. It means the period leading to hostilities against Iraq. So I'm not going to dwell a lot about rational argumentation and pragmadialectics, because we had already listened a lot, maybe in 1 hour, by Professor Van Emeren. So just in brief, these are the goals of rational argumentation. You have to maximize opportunities for critical examination of arguments. You have to provide some full disclosure of the basis of your standpoints, and you have to encourage the other points of view and channel argumentation into some sort of like clash and extension. And so when you are arguing, you are inventing actually new positions. You don't come to argumentation with preconceived positions or stances. Actually, you discover your argument through some sort of joint exchange of standpoints. Okay, so according to pragmadialectics, a fallacy is when argumentation derails from rational discussion. So what is not argumentation like this? If you remember Al Jazeera, this is al-ittijah al-mu'akis, one of the different viewpoints type of public show in Arabic. This is not rational argumentation, because these people are about to start a fight actually. So that's argumentation is not obstinate quarreling, it's not cynical sophistry, it's not adversarial debate. So it's some sort of collaborative type of communicative encounter. Okay, let's start with the strawman fallacy. Strawman fallacy is when you actually imputate a point of view to your opponent, when you distort his standpoint so that you can weaken it and attack it easily. Let me give you an example. This is an example by James Moran, a Democratic congressman from Philadelphia, I think, or Virginia. So at a meeting, a public meeting in a church, he made this remark. If it were not for the strong support of the Jewish community, it means American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, for this war with Iraq, we would not be doing this. This is his standpoint. His standpoint is that the Jewish lobby is actually the one that is pushing for Iraq. This is an Israeli agenda. Bush is pushed by the Jewish lobby. That's his standpoint. But when it was media, when it went into media, an editorial in Washington Post actually distorted the meaning or the standpoint of John Moran. So this is the response, the reaction of the Washington Post editorial. Moran perpetuates a stereotype of Jews as a unified bloc. It means Jews in general. They're trying to steer the world in their benefits, and they are against the benefit of all the rest. And this is actually not the opinion of Moran. This is a distortion of what Moran stated in his speech. So this type of strawman fallacy can actually be analyzed and can be schematized in the following. The Washington editorialist commits the strawman fallacy. Why? Because they replaced Moran's proposition, the Israel lobby influence in shaping the US decision for Iraq, with another proposition which is not mentioned by Moran at all. That's a distortion of Moran's standpoint. Jews are exploiting their powerful position to steer the world in pursuit of the narrow interests of Israel against everyone else. Thereby, what they did actually, they erect a misrepresentation of Moran's standpoint. This is not Moran's standpoint at all. Moran was talking about the Jewish lobby. He was not talking about the Jewish community in the whole world, as it is stated over here. So this is a strawman fallacy, when you put different words in your opponent's mouth. Okay, this is the second fallacy. It is the fallacy of the stick. When you threaten your opponent by some sanctions, if you do that, you will receive some punishment or some sanctions. That's the second fallacy. Let me see how it actually works in everyday real data. And we are still within the same issue. We are still with Moran, our James Moran, the representative, the congressman. So this is again the same editorial. Our view that Representative James Moran is unfit to serve in Congress is not new. So Moran actually is not fit to be a congressman. Why? Because he is not sharing our point of view. So we have some authority to kick him, to fire him out of the Congress. That's the idea. And there is also some sort of evaluation of Moran's character, attacking his character, his ethical obtuseness. So we are urging the electorate to find another candidate in the next fall election. So what does this mean? If you are saying something against Israel, if you are pro-Arab or pro or anti-war, this might have some detrimental consequences for you as an American congressman. So if you want to represent this in terms of some sort of schematic fallacy, it can go like this. This is some sort of a prudential ad baculum. If you do action A, it means if you blame the Jews for what happens in Iraq, for what is going to happen in Iraq, actually, if you blame Jews for Bush's policy vis-a-vis Iraq, then consequence C will happen to you. What is consequence C? It means we will remove you from the Congress. The occurrence of C, the removal of you from Congress is something that you don't desire. It's against your interest. Therefore, it is reasonable for you as a U.S. congressman to stop blaming Israel for whatever happens in the U.S. Congress. So this is not actually critical argumentation. Why? It's not critical argumentation because you are actually blocking the other opponents from stating his opinion. And this is a violation of Rule 1 in pragmadialectical theory, the freedom rule. It means any discussant, any arguer has the right to express his standpoint. There is no exceptions, be it Israel or whatever, you can state your standpoint, but within reasons. It should not be some sort of like an ethical argument or whatever. Okay, this is another argument at the back column. This is direct personal attack. If you remember that scene, it's when a shoe was rejected, was thrown at Bush. This is a good example of a fallacy. If you don't share my opinion, you don't have to abuse me, either verbally or physically. You have to enter into some sort of dialogue so that we can reach some rational type of consensus or agreement. So this argumentum ad hominem is fallacious because it's not based on the merit of arguments. It is based on force. This can be shown clearly in this schematic representation. The respondent Moran is a person of bad character. He's obtuse, he's bigoted, he's anti-Semitic. Therefore, his point of view should not be accepted. Why? Because he's not actually polite. He's saying some bad things about American Jews, which is unethical. So this is how we can schematize this type of fallacy, ad hominem fallacy. There are other examples, not just pertaining to Moran. You can also actually, ad hominem fallacy is very, very available everywhere in my corpus. If you look at Chirac, for example, so the Times does not actually address the anti-war opinion or standpoint of Chirac by they attack his person. So this is how they reacted to Chirac's anti-war position. He's like a man smoking a cigarette after making love. He's a self-hating, lightweight party technician. He's a super liar. He's the crook. He's a lifelong political cynic transformed into some sort of international visionary. He never achieved anything compared to Mitterrand. So this is not actually argumentation. This is insulting your opponent, and this is a clear violation of critical discussion. Because the point at issue is, should the United States attack Iraq, invade Iraq or not? That's the issue. It's not is Chirac a good man or a bad man? So this is actually some sort of violation of argumentation, reasonableness of argumentation, etc. So let me a bit speed up because I only have 5 minutes. Circumstantial ad hominem. Circumstantial ad hominem actually is when you say to your opponent that you are not consistent. You took a decision which is different from the decision you are about to take. If we see, for example, Robin Cook. This is Robin Cook's standpoint. He's saying, why should you invade Iraq right now? You have been helping Iraq for 20 years. Why should we invade Iraq this week? Why is it so urgent? The answer was from Rig Mox from the Times, because that's what we did with Kosovo. So if Kosovo was legal when you were the foreign minister of the United Kingdom, this means Iraq invading Iraq will also be legal. So this type of analogical reasoning actually is fallacious. I will show why it is fallacious. And this is how I represent this circumstantial ad hominem. Cook advocates argument alpha. It means why should we invade Iraq today? It means invading Iraq is illegal. Cook has done something inconsistent with what he is preaching today. So Cook should not be listened to because Cook is some sort of political hypocrite. This is the logic behind this fallacy. And let me go to analogical or argument by faulty fallacy, comparing, for example, invading Iraq with bombing Serbia, or coming to the help of Bosnia. This is fallacious, especially when you invoke the Nazi analogy or the Holocaust analogy, saying, for example, that Saddam has done a lot of bad things. His soldiers are raping women. It's some sort of like Holocaust. Why did we interfere against Hitler and against the Serbian dictator? Why not against Saddam, etc.? The problem with such analogy is that it has some fallacious schematic representation, like here. Saddam is like Hitler. He gassed his people. He waged war against the Kurds. He invaded Kuwait. He's firing scuds at Israel, etc. Hitler could not be contained, so Saddam also could not be contained because all dictators could not be contained. The problem with such analogical reasoning is that there is no symmetricity. Iraq is not another Bosnia, of course. Because, for example, Saddam had some sort of like Ba'athi Arab nationalism, which is not based on anti-Semitism or racism or whatever. So you can't compare Ba'athism with Nazism. So because there are some properties that do not hold in both cases. And also there is another big issue, is that analogies became leading through exchange of arguments and assent. So there should be some dialogue. We should actually bring those analogies in confrontation and see what type of analogy really has good point to make. If you go to anti-war newspapers like Al-Ahram, actually the dictator is not Saddam, it's Bush. So there is some analogy like Redskins analogy. Europeans killed the aboriginals, and Iraqis are the new aboriginals, and Americans are the new Mongols. They are after our oil, after our riches. They are not actually bringing any democracy. That's just rhetoric. So when you confront that type of anti-war and pro-war analogies, that's where you can get a good and critical type of argumentation. Maybe my last fallacy is slippery slope. Slippery slope is don't take the first step. It means don't allow Saddam to defy America. Because if you allow Saddam to defy America, this means we will lose our face. And other countries like Iran, Korea are going to to defy us. And this is not morally or even politically desirable for the United States as the police of the world. So the result is we should stop Saddam, and we should to teach him a lesson that defying America cannot go unpunished. So that's how it is. And there is another type of slippery slope by Clinton. If we invade now, maybe we will have lesser casualties than if we stay and wait for Iraq to attack America. And after the war, we know that this is very fallacious, even practically reasoning. The number of people killed in Iraq are in millions. The refugees also are in millions, 6 million or something. This proves, in terms of practicality, that the slippery slope is always fallacious, even based on practical reasoning. And this is also another last fallacy, maybe, constructing an argument as some sort of dichotomous decision-making policy. Either we invade Iraq and inflict some casualties, or we wait till we will be invaded by Saddam and we will be in trouble and we will lose a lot of casualties ourselves. It means there is no other third way. This is fallacious because there is no other third way. Actually, there is another option. The conflict can be resolved peacefully, can be resolved through the United Nations. It's not only war or my way or the highway is not only the only policy. I think I can stop here. Maybe my time is over. So I still have some stuff here, but I think I can just stop here, okay?
Thank you very much for your talk. Michael Hoffman is my name. I mean, these fallacies have special names because they happen all the time. Now, that means it's not really surprising that they are used in this context as well. I have two questions. The first one is, since you are focusing on a limited amount of data within 6 or 7 weeks, did you, it would have been possible to look for good arguments as well, because there were definitely good arguments on both sides. So it would have been an interesting task to measure the ratio of fallacious argument against good arguments. That's my first question, whether you did something like that or whether you think that would be an interesting project. The second question is, looking at these fallacies, I'm wondering whether this is really black and white. If you look at analogy, for example, there is no perfect analogy. That means it might be useful to have something like a Likert scale, from bad to good. So a continuum. So that would be my second question, what you would think about qualifying arguments not according to the dichotomy fallacy, not fallacy, but like more separated in more different grades.
Yeah, thank you for your question. That's a very good question, actually. You're requiring why I didn't use some good arguments. Actually, these are very good arguments. They are actually crafted to look good and deceive us. That's where the problem is. So my job as a discourse analyst is to unravel the ideology behind that type of good arguments. They really look very good. And they can cheat the layman.
There are really good arguments which do not only look good, but that are good.
But they are fallacious.
No, they are good arguments.
Can you give us an
example? There's a good argument for war, and there's a good argument against war.
Yeah.
The good argument for war, as we know, depends massively on some knowledge. And that was the main problem, that the factual assumptions simply were wrong. But in a way, you cannot know whether these assumptions are wrong or not. So you can only say, based on these assumptions, it might be possible to make a good argument. I do not want to argue for war or against war. That's not my point. My point is, I assume there were also good arguments, not only that look good, but they really were good.
I can answer this question, actually. Actually, in terms of legal and ethical principles, they are really just fake arguments.
But then we have a good argument against war.
Yeah, because actually it's against the common, the international community. You are looking for the weapons of mass destruction. Actually, it's weapons of mass deception. It's just lies. Okay. There is no such type as WMDs. You went there, you looked, you didn't even give chance to the inspectors to finish what they are there for. That's democracy. You are bringing democracy and you are acting undemocratically. That's some sort of contradiction.
Okay, may I invite you to continue? continue the discussion after the session. We have 2 more questions.
Hi, my name is Tina, and I'm from Pomona College. My question is that you describe emotional appeals at the beginning of your speech as a logical fallacy, but I think that a lot of the most important moral decisions should not be divorced from emotion. For example, in the context of the Iraq War, certainly it would be legitimate in an argument against it to make an emotional appeal to the death and immense suffering that Iraqi civilians would experience. So I guess my question is, one, do you agree that emotions have a place in rational argumentation? And 2, if so, how do we determine when we are over-relying on emotions?
Yeah, I agree with you. Emotional appeal is not fallacious all the time. It depends on the context. Let me give you an example given by Douglas Walton. Douglas Walton in the invasion of Iraq, actually in the invasion of Iraq in 1991. He gave the example of a Kuwaiti girl whose age is 13. She's claiming that she had just come from Kuwait and she's a nurse and she has seen some Iraqi soldiers throwing children on the floor from the incubators, and they're doing a lot of bad stuff. It means you go to the infant incubator, you take that tube out and you just leave the infants die, and you take the incubators back to Iraq. And it proved in the end that this is just a lie, because the girl was actually the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States, and it was a fake witnessing, and it went on 60 hours on the American media, and this is actually, and it had a purpose to help Bush Sr. invade Iraq or to chase Iraq from Kuwait. This is another example of appeal to emotional appeal, but this time it's legitimate appeal to emotion. This is a guy, an Iraqi civilian guy, 27 years old. He was tortured, and the doctor autopsy clarified that his name is Baha Musa, 93 injuries, detailed in 46 photographs. And the British doctor claimed that the man was not tortured at all. And this is a case in courts right now. And it shows actually how British soldiers are systematically using torture in Basra, saying nothing about Abu Ghraib and the rest. This is emotional appeal that is legitimate. But the other one I gave you about the Kuwaiti girl, that's a fake story it's like saying Taliban are hitting their girls or whatever. We are there to save the girls, but you are not there to save Iraqi women. You are there to save your companies to steal oil. That's it.
Right. In fact, I haven't got a question rather than a comment. Your arguments are very good and very excellent simply because things are measured by their results. The result is that Iraq was invaded, the wealth was swallowed, and so many people lost lives, in fact, and souls. Innocent people died, and nothing achieved except apart from that. This means that your arguments are good. So things are measured by their results. Those arguments prove that the war was wrong. So those arguments are good, in fact. That's the comment.
There is actually a concern about this. It's consequentialist argumentation. Like what Clinton said, goals justify means. That's really fallacious, because means should be ethical, should be justifiable, and should be legitimate. If you want to do a good, noble, if you want to achieve a noble goal, you have to use noble and democratic ways to achieve that ideal or whatever it is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.